off at number 5, I just rewrote the problem right here. We are going to try and find certain values. So the first one is saying g of -4. Now I know from your knowledge from this class that you know that we're going to take that -4 and plug it in for x, right? The problem is that I don't know what equation to plug into. The way that you know what equation to plug into is by plugging into one specifically from the boundaries. So I need to figure out where -4 falls, whether it's between the first one, which is greater than -8, +8, greater than +8. The second one, which is between -2 and 8, or if it's less than -2. Well, obviously it's less than -2, which means we're going to take this equation, -3/2 times -4 plus 2. Then we simplify. This ends up giving me 12 divided by 2, which is 6, and 6 plus 2, which is 8. Now, on this specific one, you can also figure out what it is using the graph on the lines up here, right? Once I figure out what equation it is, I go where g is -4, and then we go up to the graph, and that would be right here, which is at 8. So my value would be 8. Either way of doing this is totally fine, just sometimes it's way off the graph, and you would have to figure it out by plugging it in. So if we look at the second one, g of -2. Well, this one's a little bit trickier because I'm not sure what equation it goes into because -2 is a boundary. Now, if you pay attention, obviously we're going to end up plugging into this bottom one, right? Because this one is including -2, whereas the one above it is not. So we're going to plug into the same equation to figure that out. So we would end up with 6/2, which is 3, and 3 plus 2, which is 5. Again, if we go to our graph where x is 2, we move up and we would have to be up here, which is at 5. So the next one, this one would end up giving me 4. And the reason why we end up getting 4 is if you look at your graph, go to 0. And if you move up, you end up at 4. Now that does give it away if you go this way versus the other on which equation to plug into. 0 does fall into this middle category, which only has a 4, right? So there is no x to plug in for, so it just stays that number, which is 4. Again, you can use your graph if it's there to help you out to know which one to use. You will be given just equations without the graphs as well, so you do need to know how to do both ways. On the next one, we have g of 10. So again, you can use your graph, or we have to figure out where to plug it into our equations, right? Well, 10 is greater than 8, so that means that I need to plug it into that first one. If I do, you're left with just 10. We have one more example just like this. So again, the first thing that we're going to do is worry about our boundaries. So our boundaries are at -2 and +4. So -2 is my imaginary line and a +4. So then we break down each one. This first one is just 8. Remember, when it's just 8, it's y equals 8, which is always a horizontal line. So that horizontal line is going to be where x is less than -2. And the less than -2 is in this area. So we're going to have an open circle and go straight to the left. Our next equation is just a linear equation, and because we're right in the middle, I can just basically graph it, right? We would start up 1, and then we'd move down 1/2, down 1/2, up 1/2, right? Now we just need to worry about open or closed circles. It's included at -2 because it has a line underneath it, and it is not included, so it needs to be an open circle at 4. Then we have our last one. Now this one, we can just start graphing it and see where it hits the line, or remember, we can always take this 4 and plug it in. If we do that, we end up getting 3 minus 8, which is 5. Sorry, -5. So that means we would start at -5 with a closed circle because that is included. And then all we have to do is move our slope, which is up 3/4. So now it says, where is the graph increasing, right? So again, reading it from left to right, we want to see where it is going up, which would end up being in this category all the way to the right. Okay, so it's from your boundary to the right. Well, our boundary is at 4, and all the way to the right is infinity. Now, again, remember, just because that's a closed circle does not mean this is a bracket. Increasing and decreasing is always a parenthesis. Same thing for decreasing. We just find the area where it is decreasing. Sometimes you might not have any, so you would put none, or you could put no solution. But in this case, this middle chunk is an area that is decreasing from left to right. So that means farthest left would be -2, and it goes all the way to +4. Now remember, constant is any horizontal line, which that happens in this area over here on the left. So farthest left is -infinity. Farthest right would be that -2 boundary that we have over here. So again, on the next one, we can use the graph. I'm going to use the graph on the first two, or maybe I'm going to use both probably. Okay, so first off, if we're trying to find -2, I need to figure out where -2 falls. Well, that is this line right here, right? So we would look where it's at -2, right? Well, at -2, it's in 2 spots, but we would take the closed circle. So that means that this would be at 2. Okay, now, if we did this algebraically, we would have to come back up to our original functions and see where it falls. We would have to notice that it is greater than or equal to -2 here and plug it into this equation. So -1/2 times -2 plus 1. That would give me 1 plus 1, which ends up at 2. Remember, there are times where you will have to plug into the equation. If we need -6, -6 is going to fall in the category of the first one, which is where x is less than -2. That means that we just have 8, right? So there's no x to plug into, so that means my value would be 8. Again, if you look at your graph at -6, if we go up, we would hit at 8. Next one we have is at 2, so +2, which means that we would be in the category that is between -2 and 4. That means we plug in 2 for our x, and we would end up getting -1 plus 1, which ends up giving me 0, or a donut with sprinkles. So if we look at our graph at 2, it is hitting at 0, so we did do that right. And our last one, f of 8. So 8 falls in the category of our last one, and that means we're going to use 3/4 times 8 minus 8. That ends up giving me 6 minus 8, which has my final answer of -2.